Hello and welcome, my name's Ryan, I'm also known as RM2KDev. In this video, we are going to be doing the start of our handshaking process between the client and the server. We may not actually do that in this video, but we are going to be doing all of the stuff that we need to actually do that. Depends on how long the video goes, so I will not waste time on the intro anymore, and let's jump right in and get started. So, in order to make a handshake, we need to send data back to the client. However, GameMaker accepts data in a very specific format, as you know or might not know, but it does. And that format uses packets of buffers. They're called buffers in GameMaker. Actually, they're called buffers in everything, but they need buffers. So we need first the ability to create and define a buffer that GameMaker will accept. So with that said, I'm going to create a new JavaScript file called packet.js. And I'm gonna do that again because I did that terribly. Packet.js. Now, inside of packet.js, we need to create, we need to require in a file. So I'm going to say var parser equals require. Actually, we don't need to do that yet. Okay, we're not going to do that yet. We don't need that yet. We are going to say module.exports equals packet equals and then a JSON object. So basically what we're doing here is we're saying when you require this library in, we're going to say, it's basically like saying var packet equals this. So when you export this, this is what goes out of the file. So packet becomes available. So we're saying packet equals something, and we're going to export packet out of the application. So in that, we're going to have a couple of functions, but I'm only going to do one for now because we really only need this first packet. We really only need this first function, and that function is going to be called build. Not build, build. It's going to be a function, and that function will take an object called params. There we go. I'm just going to add a comment above this to say params equals array. You know what, I'm going to do this in a semicolon. Params, an array of JavaScript objects to be turned into buffers. Okay, so build is going to take an array of JavaScript objects and turn them into buffers. So we will come back to building this function in a little bit. We're going to go back to our client.js file where we will begin our initialization using that function, of course. So instead of saying do some stuff, we're going to say var client equals this. So basically, if we end up inside of a function or out of the scope of this function, we can always use client to come back to this object. Because I'll explain that. This will actually change context depending on where it is. So right now, the word this represents this entire function here. This entire function with all of the methods on it. However, in JavaScript, you can have functions inside of functions, functionception. So I'm going to say function something over here. And now if I were to say this, okay, the word this represents this function only. So if I had something on my client, like this.test equals hi, and I said this.test, that would work. However, if I said this.test within our secondary function, it would crash. It would say it doesn't know what test is, because on this scope of the application, test doesn't exist. So what we need to do is say var client equals this. So now down in our secondary scope, we can say client.test, and that's going to refer back to client, which knows what this actually is. So I hope that wasn't too much information there. JavaScript knowledge, you should know it. And maybe I got it wrong. If I got it wrong, let me know, but I don't think I got it wrong. So yeah, take that. Right, so var client equals this. Now the client has a socket object on it, which has been added at runtime. So we can say something along the lines of client.socket.write. And that's going to allow us to send data back to the server. And the data that we're going to send back to the server is going to be packet.build. That's a function, and it takes an array of JavaScript objects as its first parameter. And those objects are going to be the words hello. So it's the first object. The second object is going to be, this is where we're going to use this now library. It's going to be now.toString. So basically, we're going to get the current milliseconds of the server, and we're just going to send that back for debug purposes. Now I'm just going to add a comment above this to say, send the connection handshake packet to the client. I think that should be implied, but I'll add it there anyway. Now, obviously, packet.build doesn't exist in the scope of this application, and it hasn't been required into the application at all, so it's not going to work. It'll crash. So we need to jump back into server.js, the very top of our file of server.js. We're going to add the line to require that file in. Require, and it's going to say /packet.js. Now, if you look back at packet.js, you'll notice the packet.js exports the variable packet onto the global scope, so that when we're in our client, we can access packet anywhere in our application. The same way that we did with maps, and the same way that we did with, no, I think we only did it with maps. Yeah, so the same way we did it with maps. So basically, packet now exists on the global scope because it was one of the first things that happened when our server loaded. And obviously, we don't use a client until the server has loaded, so we can use packet from that point onwards in our application. So if all is well, we should be able to give this a test and see if the server will happily send the data. The other thing I'll do is I'll just add a console.log, and I'm just going to say in here that we've initiated a client. Client initiated. Just so that we can see that it actually has worked. I'm going to rerun our server. Server is running. I'm going to go back to our MMORPG test project, and I'm going to start that. And what we should see is a nice error. Let's have a quick look. Invalid data, obviously, because we actually haven't built this packet.build function. I apologize for that. That is quite funny. So yeah, let's build that function. So yeah, go into packet.js, and I'm going to start building this function. So we need to declare a couple of variables first. Packet parts equals, and it's just going to be an empty array. Packet size is going to be 0. Now we're going to loop through each of the parameters, and we're going to turn them into buffers, and then we're going to add them into this packet parts array. So I'm going to say params.forEach. Now the forEach function, obviously, it takes a function as a parameter, and the function is going to pass in a param. So we pass in an array of objects in JavaScript. We go through each of those objects and we execute this function, which is executing for that individual item in that array. So now we need to declare a buffer. I'm going to say buffer like that. And this is where we're going to get a little bit intelligent in the way that our application runs. I'm going to add two types of data here, strings and numbers. We're not going to deal with complicated numbers or anything like that. We're just going to deal with straight old integers and strings of text. So if type of param equals, because we're comparing the type, if it's a string, we're going to do this. Whatever's inside of this, do this. Otherwise, else if the type of param was a number, then we're going to do this. Otherwise, if we don't know what it was, we need to show a message on the server saying that we don't know what it is, and we need to implement that at a future date. So we're just going to say console.log warning, unknown data type in packet builder. And hopefully this won't happen, because we're only going to be dealing with things like strings, like text, chat messages, player names, and positional values like X and Y, which are usually integer-based numbers, and even things like inventory items, which are usually an index, which is a number, and item count, which is a number. So hopefully we shouldn't see this. If we do see it, we'll implement that when we see it. So now we have to deal with those. So if it was a string, we're going to say buffer equals new buffer, capital B, and it's going to contain param. It's going to be of type UTF-8. Now, the way GameMaker deals with strings in buffers, because a string is something that varies in length. It could be 1 byte, it could be 2 byte, it could be 10 bytes. You don't know how long the string is going to be. So the way GameMaker deals with it is if you tell it that the value is a buffer, it's going to start at the current position in the byte array, and it's going to move forward in that byte array until it encounters a 0. So if I make a example in the comments here, let's just assume that we have, I don't know, the letters A, B, C. In a buffer, I don't know what these values are going to be. That would be hexadecimal values. I'm just going to say like FF, FF, FF. And finally, we're going to add a 0, 0. Now, GameMaker will actually, if you tell GameMaker, hey, I'm looking for a string, it's going to go and start from here. It's going to go FF, A, FFB, FFC, 0, 0. Hang on a minute. That's the end of the string. So that's how we tell GameMaker that the string has ended when it is of undefined length. In order to do that, however, we need to create a 0 buffer. So something I'm going to add to the top of our packet function is var 0 buffer. It's going to be equal to new buffer. And it's just going to be of type 0, 0. Sorry, it's going to contain value 0, 0, and it's going to be of type hex for hexadecimal. So basically nothing. That's what that means. Nothing in hex. Okay, so now that we have our buffer of text, we need to concatenate or add our empty buffer to the end of that. It's actually not empty, it's full of nothing because it's 0. So I'm going to say buffer equals, we're just going to use buffer.concat. Concatenate means to put two things together. And it's going to concatenate an array, so we pass it an array. The first is going to be what buffer currently is, which is the string of text in hexadecimal UTF-8 form. And then we're also going to add the 0 buffer to the end of that. Now the size of the buffer needs to be the buffer's current length, so buffer.length plus 1 byte, because we're adding 1 byte of 0 to the end of our string. Okay, so now that we've created our string buffer, we can deal with our number buffer. So if it was of type number, we're going to create a new buffer. Now, all numbers in our server, I'm going to default them to 2 bytes in size. So that basically allows you to use an unsigned integer. 16-bit, 2 bytes, 16-bit, I think. We'll see if it works. If it doesn't work, we'll fix it up after. Buffer.write. So this time we're going to use a different method. We've got a new buffer. It's 2 bytes in size. We're going to write into that a U standing for unsigned int 16-bit or byte, I can't remember what that means, long endian, little endian, no such thing as long endian, and that's going to be param, which is the number that came into the server, and we're going to do that at position 0 of the buffer. Otherwise, show the message that the data type was unknown, and finally we're going to increment the size of our packet, which is packet size. So packet size plus equals buffer.length, and finally packet parts dot push, because that was an array. We're going to push this current buffer into that array. Obviously there's multiple parts. For instance, the hello message or the handshake is going to go through this function here. It's going to go, oh, hello, that's a string, create a buffer, push it into the array packet parts, jumps back around, does it again, it goes second time, oh, hang on a minute, it's a number, writes the number into a new buffer, pushes that buffer into the packet parts, and then at the end of all of that for looping, we can start to create and build our packet. So we need to create a new buffer that contains our data. So I'm going to say var data buffer, because currently we just have an array of buffers. So we need to use buffer.concat again. So buffer.concat, standing for concatenate, putting two things together. We're going to pass it the array, which was packet parts, and it's going to be the size packet size, because we've already counted how big that packet was. Now, the way that we're going to deal with data in our client is to start that. Let me start that again. The way we're going to deal with data in our client is to start all of the data packets off with the size of the packet. So our data format will be something like this: size, then it will be data, And then it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter if two packets get stuck together, because what happens when you're sending data back and forth at high frequency across the internet is your computer will buffer some of that information up before it gets to your game. And so you're going to end up with you send the word login, let's say it was ff00 ff00 ff login, right? And then you send the character data back across the network, and you send, like, say 6a 7b cc 7b cc dd ee ffg, not gg. We send that across the network as soon as we've sent the login packet, and you expect it to arrive one at a time, but it doesn't. It arrives like this. Well, how do you deal with that? Because you don't have one packet that matches a format. You've got two packets and they're stuck together. So the way that we do it, or the way that I've decided to do it, is to first define how long the packet is. So if the packet was, say, 5 letters long, hello, and then the next packet was, say, 3 letters long, hey, and the next packet was, let's say, 3 letters long, it's positional data for someone else, and all 3 of those packets arrived at the same time, then we would easily be able to pluck this out. We would go read the first byte. Oh, it's 5 bytes long. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to take that and I'm going to stick it in an array. And then you start again. You go, well, the next one is 3 bytes long. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to take that and I'm going to put that in an array. And then you go, well, the next packet is 3 bytes long. So I'm going to take that, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to put that in an array. And then you go, I'm going to strip out these size variables, and all you're left with is the data in an array that you can process individually. So you've basically separated all of the things that were stuck together. I hope that made sense. So we need to calculate the size of our packet, including the size packet, which is actually going to be 1 byte itself. I'm going to say var size equals new buffer, and it's going to be 1 byte in length. I'm going to write an 8-bit integer into that. So write an unsigned, because it's always going to be above 0, int. It's going to be 8 bits, and that data that we're going to write into that is going to be the data buffer dot length plus 1, and we're going to write that at the very beginning of this buffer. So what we've essentially written here is the size of our data plus the size of our size packet, which is going to be size plus data. So if data was, if we had something like hello, which was 5 bytes, we would write 5. The size of this packet is 6 bytes. So we've got size and then HELLO, which is 5 bytes. So we have 6 bytes in total size, which allows us to send a packet across saying that it's 6 bytes long, so that we can go from the beginning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and chop that out and split it up on the client side. Whew, that is kind of complicated, but I hope I explained it well. If you don't understand it, pause the video, rewind, go back, start that section again, because it did make sense in my head, I think. Anyway, so now that we have the data buffer, the size of the packet that we're sending, we can create our final packet. So var final packet is going to be equal to buffer.concat. Sorry, let's spell that with capital B. Concat. And that's going to be a concatenation of the size buffer and then the data buffer. Now, the size of this buffer is going to be the length of size plus the length of our data buffer. Data buffer dot length. So now we again have calculated the size of those two buffers, because don't forget, this isn't actually the size. This is what we're writing into the size variable. The size variable is always 1 byte, so we need to know that the size of the size buffer and also the size of our data buffer to create our final packet, which consists of the size buffer and the data buffer. Finally, we can return the final packet out of this function. So anytime we send information into this function, it goes through this process where it gets converted into a series of buffers, concatenated together, attached, poked, prodded with a stick, and then sent back out of the function. Now I'm going to save my project, rerun the project, and hopefully, if I reconnect to the server using my GameMaker client, we should see no errors. And you'll see that we do not see an error and the client has been initiated. So if I jump into client.js, That means that it has successfully executed these 2 lines and then moved on to this line, which means that we have written the hello packet back to our client. I hope all of that made sense. So thank you guys for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on this video. Don't forget to share this video with your friends and family and dog and cat and mother and brother and sister. And if you have a mum who programs, that'd be pretty cool. But anyway, don't forget to share it. Please don't forget to like it. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.